Hello there, this is Krytical, and this is my beginner-friendly deep dive guide for the Heart of the One's Elite Necromancer spec, Reaper. There will be a written version of this guide with images available online as soon as possible. There's timestamps and chapter markers below in case you want to jump forward or move backwards. This guide is told from my perspective as a solo roamer and a solo queue player, but it is not meant to be viewed as the right or only way to play Reaper. In this guide, we'll cover armor and weapons, armor runes and weapon sigils. We'll go over weapon and utility skills, interactions and combos, including fields and finishers, and how and why to path the build. We'll discuss the playstyle and some strengths and weaknesses of Reaper. Before we call it a day, we'll review a full PvP match with commentary about what I'm doing and why, as well as being honest about my own misplays, and my general mindset and overall thoughts on Reaper. Let's take a look at gear selection. This is a power Reaper build using Greatsword and Staff. Of course, there are other viable weapon loadouts such as Axe Focus. In WvW, I run Marauder or Berserker gear, or a mix, and Marauder or Berserker PvP amulet. If you're comfortable with less HP, run Berserker. If you can equip infusions, use Might. Rune and sigil choice may depend on your budget or access, and some you may need to craft for yourself. The PvP match we will review later was filmed wearing Exuberance runes, but these can be quite expensive on the trading post for WvW. I've been testing Rune of Ice, but I'm not ready to make a hard judgment on it just yet. Of course, don't be afraid to try other power-oriented rune setups. For Greatsword sigils, I run Vision and Celerity in WvW, and Intelligence and Savagery in PvP. Intelligence and Vision both grant crit on swap. Celerity grants 5 seconds of quickness after disabling an enemy, and Savagery increases stun duration and damage to stun targets. In both WvW and PvP, I run Energy and Cleansing on Staff. This is a very popular backbar in WvW, and it also works well in PvP. Keep in mind, you will need to craft your own cleansing sigils. Let's move on to weapon and utility skills. Greatsword 1 is your spammable melee attack, and it can be set to auto attack by holding control and right-clicking the ability. It's a 3-attack chain that cleaves up to 3 targets. The first swing does a small amount of damage and generates a small amount of life force. The second swing does a little more damage but generates the same amount of life force. And the final swing does even more damage, generates a larger amount of life force, and it will chill targets that are struck. I suggest setting Greatsword 1 to auto attack, as the chill effect is extremely important to our build. And setting Greatsword 1 to auto attack applies it to Shroud 1 as well. More on that later. I don't use this tech personally, but you can use any instant cast utility skill without breaking the chain of attacks. Over time, as builds and skills are buffed and nerfed, perhaps this tech may have value. I've done a little testing, and while I don't think it's strong currently, keep an eye out for that one. Gravedigger, Greatsword 2, is a 360-degree heavy strike that does a large amount of damage on up to 5 targets. It's a world combo finisher, and if you hit a target below 50% HP or an enemy that's in down state, it will instantly reset and can be spammed with no cooldown. Greatsword 3 is called Death Spiral. After winding up, it does damage, generates life force, and applies vulnerability on up to 3 targets in a sort of AoE cone within melee range. Death Spiral is another world combo finisher. Greatsword 4 is a dark combo field called Nightfall. This ability spawns a combo field under your feet that expands in size, pulsing damage and conditions on up to 5 foes within the zone every 2 seconds, with a total of 4 pulses. Greatsword 5 is Grasping Darkness, often just called Grasp. When cast, it sends a wave of claws to a target up to 900 units away. Up to 5 enemies struck by the wave will be chilled, pulled to your position, and generate life force. Whenever possible, you should consider trying to use this in combination with other abilities, further punishing enemies who do not or cannot dodge or block Grasp. Staff 1 is Necrotic Grasp, a 1200 range spammable that pierces and damages up to 5 targets and generates life force. Mark of Blood is your Staff 2 attack. When triggered, up to 5 enemies will take damage and have bleed applied to them. If you are within the mark when it is triggered, you will also gain regeneration. Staff 3 is called Chill Blades. When triggered, this mark creates a poison combo field, which will apply chill and poison on up to 5 enemies within the field. Putrid Mark is your Staff 4. When triggered, it acts as a blast finisher, damaging up to 5 targets, as well as transferring 3 conditions from yourself to an enemy. Reaper's Mark, your Staff 5 attack, will apply Fear and Chilled on up to 5 enemies within the field. When cast directly on top of an enemy, this is our only on-demand instant crowd control. Reaper Shroud is our spec mechanic, and while in Reaper Shroud, your weapon is replaced with a Spectral Scythe. Reaper Shroud is our primary source of damage and pressure. Shroud 1, similar to Greatsword 1, is a 3-attack chain. Each strike ramps in damage and cleaves up to 3 enemies, and the final strike grades quickness. If you have set Greatsword 1 to auto attack by control right-clicking, this will apply to Shroud 1 as well. Death Charge is your Shroud 2 ability. It's a leap combo finisher that will propel you forward, destroying incoming projectiles and doing damage as you go. At your destination, you will apply the blindness condition and do damage. When used on an enemy that's within melee range, you will not advance past that enemy. However, the other effects will still apply. Shroud 3 is called Infusing Terror. When activated, you will see a green and black smoky column over your character's head. This grants stability and reduces incoming strike and condition damage. You can also reactivate this ability within 6 seconds, which will fear and chill enemies within extended melee range. This is signified by a kind of Reaper-looking animation directly above your character model. Shroud 4 is another world combo finisher called Soul Spiral. While spinning, you will damage and poison up to 5 targets within extended melee range. This is our most important damaging ability, and you should try to cover it with stability whenever you can. More on that later. Executioner Scythe, your Shroud 5 ability, will stun and chill a single opponent, doing more damage the lower the enemy's health and create an ice combo field underneath them. Moving on to utility skills, your heal is Consume Conditions. It clears conditions, healing more per condition consumed, but also applies vulnerability to yourself. Seemingly mandatory for most Necromancer builds, Spectral Walk causes you to become spectral, leaving a tether at your location and breaking stun when activated. For up to 10 seconds, you can reactivate this ability to return to your original position. While spectral, you will cleanse a condition every 2 seconds, generating life force. Spectral Walk has a wide variety of uses, allowing you to use terrain to your advantage, such as activating it when behind a wall or a door, running out and attacking, and then recalling back to safety, or jumping off of a wall or high ground, forcing some enemies to choose between taking the bait and jumping after you, only to watch you return to the high ground, or risk allowing you to avoid combat long enough to be able to reset. Combining Spectral Walk with Fleshworm greatly increases the effective range, giving you an opportunity to chase far beyond your normal range, while still allowing a brief window to return to safety. You can use the Spectral Walk Fleshworm combination to stomp an enemy, similar to the Notorious Thief Shadow Step Stomp. All credit and respect to S. Sufer for teaching me this tech. Please be sure to check out their channel, incredible player. Spectral Ring is an ethereal combo field that will inflict chilled and fear on enemies who cross into or out of the combo field, as well as providing protection to yourself and your allies when crossing in or out of the field. You will also gain life force whenever an enemy is feared for the first time. As an alternative, you may choose Spectral Armor, providing another stun break for yourself and when activated, protection, and a large amount of life force when taking damage. If you happen to find yourself dying to power builds or stun spam frequently, you may want to consider Spectral Armor. While not considered a serious utility in most builds, Spectral Grasp, also sometimes just called Grasp, can provide some fun moments, pulling people to their deaths. Whenever I find myself randomly roaming with a group, taking towers and keeps, I like to slide in Spectral Grasp to yank defenders to their doom. It's not always the most useful ability, but when it does land, it is very funny. The memes are real. Fleshworm is the final utility in the build, and I pretty much never change it out for any other. After summoning Fleshworm, you can reactivate the ability and cast Necrotic Traversal, which acts as a blast combo finisher that will poison nearby enemies, sacrifice your Fleshworm, and teleport you to its location. While active and in combat, Fleshworm will also attack your current target with range attacks. More on Fleshworm placement later. Chilled to the Bone is the elite ability for the build. When activated, this elite does damage and applies chill on up to 5 enemies, stuns enemies with longer duration on enemies within melee range, and grants yourself stability, as well as quickness if the ability hits enemies within melee range. Let's briefly discuss some Reaper combo fields and finishers. Keep in mind that we will only cover Reaper fields and finishers with Greatsword and Staff, but there are many fields and finishers in Guild Wars 2. As a Greatsword Staff Power Reaper, the combo fields you can personally create are Dark with Greatsword 4, Poison with Staff 3, Ice with Shroud 5, and Ethereal with Spectral Ring. The combo finishers you will have access to are Whirl with Greatsword 2, 3, and Shroud 4, Blast Finisher with Staff 4, and Leap with Shroud 2. Staff 1 also has a 20% chance to act as a projectile finisher. Here's a possible combination of skills against the Ranger target dummy. Remember, this is only meant to help inform your skill use. I cast Greatsword 4, Nightfall, and then follow up with Greatsword 5, Grasp. As the Grasp wave begins to return, I cast Greatsword 4, Death Spiral. This is a power build, but we've applied 4 important conditions to our enemy: Vulnerability, Cripple, Blind, and Chill. I go into Reaper Shroud, activate Shroud 3, Infusing Terror, to grant myself stability coverage, hit a Shroud 5 for the stunning combo field. I activate Shroud 4, Soul Spiral, our big damage, which would also be spreading chill to other nearby enemies. As Shroud 4 ends, I recast Shroud 3, activating Terrify, and then Shroud 2, Death Charge, to stick to my target, destroy any incoming projectiles, and blind my target when I arrive. After that, Shroud 1 auto attack downs my enemy. Just for fun, I summon Fleshworm, activate Spectral Walk, stop my stomp on the down enemy, which is my F key, cast a Chronic Traversal to sack my Fleshworm and teleport to it, and then hit Spectral Recall at the top of the stomp animation, teleporting back to my target, finishing the stomp, and sending them back to the spawn. Let's dive into the specifics of how and why to path this build. Blood Magic is your first spec path in the build, providing life drain and sustain. Quickening Thirst is your first selectable trait. It's a simple move speed buff when over 75% HP. You won't get any benefit from the dagger portion with this build, but as the other two traits are more group support related, they serve little purpose for my playstyle. Vampiric Presence is the second selectable trait, and it's a pretty straightforward life siphon on attacks. Banshee's Wail is Warhorn and support focused, and Life from Death is also group support focused, so Vampiric Presence it is. Unholy Martyr is the final selectable trait, pulling conditions from allies onto yourself when entering Shroud, and clearing 2 conditions when exiting Shroud, converting them into Life Force. Blood Bank could be a strong option, adding some barrier to the build. Transfusion only works when there are down allies nearby, it doesn't seem really useful. Soul Reaping is the second path in the build, and it enhances your Reaper Shroud. In the first row, I run Speed of Shadows, though all 3 have some value. For example, when playing Harbinger, I take Unyielding Blast, and any Necro that's running a staff can benefit from Soul Marks. Speed of Shadows removes movement impairing conditions when entering Shroud, helping to deal with enemies who want to kite. As being kited is one of Reaper's primary weaknesses, this helps to counteract that. In row 2, Soul Barbs increases damage by 10% for 10 seconds upon entering and exiting Shroud. In theory, if you can maintain adequate life force, you can enter Shroud to activate Soul Barbs, leave Shroud when it expires to activate it again, and then re-enter Shroud to activate it again. Quite simply, the other 2 options don't provide what feels like comparable value to what's essentially a permanent 10% damage buff for all your damage. In row 3, Death Perception increases your chance for critical strikes, as well as buffs your critical strike damage while in Shroud. I feel like I don't struggle with life force generation often, which makes Eternal Life seem less valuable, and I'd rather the crit chance and crit damage of Death Perception over the burning application on Shroud 1 with Doomfire. Of course, the final trait path is Reaper. Chilling Nova is our first selectable trait. Put simply, Chilling Nova allows you to very easily spread the chilled condition, increasing your damage capability and weakening your enemies. In teamfights, this trait is extremely powerful. Relentless Pursuit may have some viability, but it does feel like overkill since we run Speed of Shadows and Soul Reaping. Augury of Death only affects Shrouds, and it doesn't really feel viable. In row 2, we select Soul Eater, increasing our damage output and melee range and adding further sustain. Decimate Defenses feels like it has little value, as our only personal method of applying vulnerability is Greatsword 3. Chilling Victory does feel viable, but Soul Eater still feels like the best choice, as it buffs all your damage within melee range. In the final row, we choose Reaper's Onslaught, and Blighter's Boon and Deathly Chill don't seem like they warrant much consideration currently. Reaper's Onslaught provides a constant 300 ferocity when in Reaper's Shroud, and the quickness we get when entering Shroud can quickly drop a ton of damage. Let's discuss the playstyle, strengths, and weaknesses of Reaper. Of course, every encounter against another player will differ from the last, but these concepts should help you get started playing Reaper. In World v. World and PvP, you'll find the Reaper is more than capable against most other melee specs, but it can struggle against elusive or long-range specs. Against new or sloppy players, your damage and crowd control will easily defeat opponents. Put simply, the damage and aggression from a good Reaper W keying onto you could quickly become overwhelming, but against very experienced players, you may need to play nearly perfectly to come out on top. Reapers hate to be kited as we lack true instant mobility, and since much of our damage is highly telegraphed, players who hold dodges and stun breaks will provide a significant challenge. However, in the chaos of teamfights, your massive cleave damage and crowd control will win you many battles. Therefore, if you're a newer player, attempt to teamfight as much as possible, as these factors will help you carry fights even as an inexperienced player or when not playing perfectly. As you become more confident, it is certainly possible to solo roam, side node, and take 1vx fights, but remember, your lack of instant mobility and instant damage means you're not a traditional roamer or duelist, and not all matchups will be favorable. Let's get into a full PvP match. I make plenty of mechanical and mental errors, as you'll see, but at the end of the match, I finish with nearly 400k damage, 17 kills, and only 1 death. At the start of every Coliseum game, I like to drop a Fleshworm in this general area. It's a good spot, and allows you to exploit the terrain should you need to evade or reset. After placing Worm, I drop down an Ancestral Willbender, who's already fighting on mid. We are a little bit outnumbered, so we have to play kinda cautiously here. I dodge around the corner and recall my Fleshworm, but not before activating Spectral Walk. Ideally, I should have activated Spectral Walk directly on mid. I see more teammates nearby and it seems like we're about to contest mid. I reactivate Spectral Walk to recall back to mid, and I kind of blindfire Chill to the bone. This was a pretty sloppy play by me, and it could have easily wasted a long cooldown, but I get lucky and catch 2 enemies on the fringe of the ability. I enter Shroud, cast Shroud 3 for stability coverage, Shroud 2 to charge onto the Guardian and apply blind, and Shroud 4 to unload damage. Ideally, I should have dropped the Shroud 5 here to spread Chill. I've gotten some decent damage out, but I've also taken a lot of condies, so I dodge and cast Consume Conditions and get around an AK heal and clear some conditions. In the chaos of the team fight, our Thief gets knocked on mid, and 2 enemies go for the stomp. As I dodge around one of the columns, our down Thief evades the stomps, pointing directly next to me. Unfortunately, I don't notice, and instead of rising him, I swap the staff and start dropping marks on mid. This is a pretty terrible mental error by me, as the Thief is right there, and I could have easily gotten the res off. Sorry, buddy. Our Willbender has already caught target on the enemy core guard, and I've tried to keep eyes on them all fight as well. I continue to poke with staff 1, playing safely around the edges of mid, looking for the right opening. When I see the core guardian within kill range, I enter Shroud and use Shroud 2 to dash towards them. A Willbender gets the knock, and despite slippery plays by our Thief to evade being stomped, the enemy Mirage finally gets it off, which rallies the core guard. By not resing our Thief when he was directly next to me, my inattention to detail could have caused a numbers disadvantage that may have lost us the node. Luckily, the Willbender and I have done so much cleave that we are in an advantageous position, as the core guard, Soul Beast, and Reaper are all at low HP, with only the enemy Mirage being in pretty decent shape. As the core guard attempts to escape past me, I drop a Spectral Ring, knowing that they're now in a lose-lose situation. If they stay in the ring, they're going to die to me or the Willbender, and if they cross, they eat a fear at low HP, and they probably die anyway. They try to cross, they're feared, and the Willbender downs them again. I head around the columns back to mid, and start cleaving the low HP Soul Beast and Reaper. I activate Spectral Walk in case I get knocked off mid, and for some reason I cast Heal. There's really no reason for me to cast Heal here, I should have just kept doing damage. Ultimately, this gameplay review and commentary is as helpful for me as it may be for anyone else. It's not at all embarrassing. Thankfully, my first game of the day skill usage doesn't affect this fight, and we cleave the downs and mid is ours. I take a moment while standing on the node to assess the minimap and the game state. With allies capping mid, I begin to rotate to the far node, where I see our Catalyst is already fighting. As I get there, the enemy core guard has rezzed and has also come to contest the node. Our Catalyst re-engages and I drop staff marks on the node, as well as the Spectral Ring. I enter the ring and cast Chill to the bone, once again catching the Bladesworn and the core guard, and I switch to Greatsword and hit a grasp on the enemy Soul Beast. I drop some cleave and then a Shroud. I cast Shroud 3 for stability, hit a Shroud 5, and Shroud 4 to drop my damage. For some reason, our whole team came here as soon as we capped mid, so we win the fight easily enough. This tends to happen when your team feels like they just crushed your mid fight, and everyone kind of rushes to the far node. It's usually not a big deal, but it's something to try to be aware of. But now I see that mid has been flipped to red, and I leave the far node as soon as the fight's over. This sequence is probably one of my worst of the match. I decide to contest the enemy Mirage, who's already going for the artifact. I'm late getting to the platform, but the fight is relatively even enough, with each of us trading off cooldowns. Mirage is one of those specs that I don't get a lot of practice fighting, so I'm just trying to feel it out and do as much AoE as I can. We seem to be evenly matched, but I'm gaining an HP advantage, being at full health while the enemy Mirage is around 70%. I wind up getting a little too cute, activate Spectral Walk, and jump off the platform, trying to debate the Mirage to follow me. Unfortunately for me, he correctly concludes that I'm an idiot, and begins freely channeling the artifact. Having now given up my HP advantage, momentum, and positioning, I stare up at the platform, wondering how it could have all went so wrong. It can't be my fault, right? Once I realize that I'm taking the bait, I recall back up to the platform, and misplay again, casting Gravedigger instead of simply auto-attacking. Having misplayed enough, I leave the platform and start to head back to mid. The game is still too close to waste any more time. Of course, the Mirage is right after me, so I drop a Spectral Ring so I can cross for protection and fear the Mirage. I enter Shroud and get a lot of damage off, but we both continue towards mid. Thankfully, to make up for my misplays, our Catalyst and Willbender are hard carrying the match, and we clean up the mid fight yet again. It feels like we're winning most of the fights, but the score is still pretty close. So I take a moment as we're finishing the fight to assess the game and see where I could be most useful. I head back to far, and as soon as I cap it, our Thief and Catalyst are fighting on the platform nearby. I head up and drop my marks and a Spectral Ring. And even though our Thief gets downed, our Catalyst and I drop big damage, downing all 3 enemies between the 2 of us, and we finish them off with our cleave. Our Thief is a downstate evasion expert, and survives long enough that our Catalyst can res him as I head back to defend the far node. I drop Staff Marks and Spectral Ring, knowing the enemy Soul Beast and Reaper will cross over them. I activate Spectral Walk and move to place my Flesh Worm behind this wall so I can abuse line of sight. This is a fine spot to place the Flesh Worm, but I'm a little too sloppy, moving further away than I needed to, and the enemy is able to start the decap. I recast Walk to return to the node, drop a Nightfall, and start damaging the Soul Beast. I get a lot of damage onto them and cast Chill to the Bone, but I cancel it by misjudging my timing and enter Reaper Shroud a split second too early. I hit a Shroud 5 on the Soul Beast and drop my damage with Shroud 4, but when I activate Shroud 3 and try to reactivate it for the Fear, I run out of Life Force and exit Shroud. I go for a Chill to the Bone, knowing that the Soul Beast is nearly down, but the enemy Reaper goes for a Shroud 5 at the same time and they manage to catch me with it. I see another enemy incoming and I know the Reaper is about to drop a ton of damage, so I instantly cast a Krytical Traversal to teleport to the worm that I placed behind the wall. I cast Heal and head back around the wall to head back into the fight. I know there's at least 3 enemies here now, but I also know that the Soul Beast is nearly dead and probably low on cooldowns. I barely miss my grasp on the Soul Beast, but get the knock on them anyway. Knowing that the Reaper will likely try to res, I drop a Chill to the Bone on top of the downstate Soul Beast, catching them, their pet, the Reaper, and the enemy Mirage and some clones. I drop a Spectral Ring on top of them and enter Shroud, dash in with Shroud 2 and start to cleave. Unfortunately, Shroud 3, 4, and 5 are all on cooldown. I don't pay close enough attention to my cooldowns, and unfortunately fail to use Shroud 3 effectively again. I get off a lot of damage, but the enemy Necro gets the res on the Soul Beast. They're both one-shots to downstate, but I'm very low on HP and cooldowns, so I cast Spectral Walk and start to kite back behind the wall again. I switch to Staff and drop some marks, knowing that I'll be chased. The enemy Mirage procs my Mark of Blood that I place directly on top of myself, which gives me some regen. I kite as far as I can, and before my bulk expires, I recast it to return. When I port back, our Willbenders they're fighting. My heal is a fraction of a second away from coming off cooldown, and if I had dodged or entered Shroud the second I returned, I'd likely get the heal off and never die this match. Thankfully, the lead we built thus far keeps us in good shape, and I managed to survive the outnumbered situation long enough that our team has won and secured the other nodes. I res, and with us holding home in mid, you can probably guess I start heading back to far. As I'm on my way there, the Core Guardian, Soul Beast, and Reaper are all heading towards mid or the artifact. I drop some Staff Marks, activate Walk, Ring, and hit a massive Chill to the Bone, catching everything in sight. I switch to Greatsword, cast all my Greatsword abilities, and enter Shroud as my grasp is pulling the Soul Beast in. I cast Shroud 3, 5 for the stun and combo field, and start cleaving with Shroud 4 for big damage. I have the Soul Beast and Reaper to about half HP, and I know that the Core Guard uses the lead to avoid my damage. However, I see the Bladesword come in, and now it's me versus 4. I cast Flesh Worm towards mid, and instantly cast a Krytical Traversal, knowing my team is nearby. I swing my camera around and switch to Staff, drop some marks, and swing around to the side, looking for an opening. A Willbender calls target on the Reaper, so I enter Shroud to dash in, downing the Reaper, and then the Soul Beast quickly after. This is a strong team that plays well together. Shout out to all these guys. We clean it up and I go to my happy place, the far node, to flip it back for our team. The Bladesworn and Core Guard catch the res and they come to contest. I summon Flesh Worm, placing it in front of the platform in case I need to disengage. I drop a ring on the node, put some marks around the edge for me to dodge into, and go for a Chill to the Bone. I misjudged the animation timing a little and cut it early by entering Shroud. I swear I have a mental block about letting Chill to the Bone finish. I cast Shroud 3 instantly, hit a Shroud 5, and then start dropping my Shroud 4 damage. I miscalculate my Life Force pool again and Shroud 2 through the Bladesworn onto the Core Guard instead of recasting Shroud 3. I take a bunch of damage here, and rather than risk another death, I port to my Flesh Worm near the platform to try to buy time to reset or for my heal to come off cooldown. A Willbender has arrived, and I'm confident that they can handle the 1v2 while I let my health regen. They take a lot of damage, and for the second time in very recent memory, I misjudge my Chill to the Bone timing, cancelling the animation by swapping a Greatsword. I drop a Greatsword 4 and hit a grasp onto the Core Guard, and he eats a bunch of condies. I hit a Gravedigger as he retreats back to the node, and I drop a ring so I can grab some protection and heal. Knowing that I've already messed up Chill to the Bone at least twice recently, I make sure I let the cast finish, enter Shroud, I cast Shroud 3, 5 to keep the guard locked down, and create the combo field, and Shroud 4 for the knock. I lose a little focus here as they cleave the Core Guard, and when I swing my camera around, I see that our Willbender and the enemy Bladesworn have downed each other. I finish cleaving the guard, and the enemy Bladesworn hits his downstate ability, Vengeance. I don't want another teammate to die because I'm not paying close enough attention, so I hit the res on our Willbender. At this point, the game is well in hand as we have a 100-point lead, and we only need about 50 points to end it. The enemy Bladesworn reses, comes to contest the node. With our lead, I attempt to stay in the dead center of the node, knowing that we almost certainly win while holding only one. I make a couple of rough dodges and the node is briefly contested, nevertheless we win the game holding both home and far nodes. I finished the game with 3 top badges, 388k damage, 100k healing, 70 kills, 1 death, and 1 res. When attacking or defending, I generally precast and keep a flesh worm active in a place where I'll be able to use terrain, line of sight, or both. While I get lucky quite often casting flesh worm even while enemies are wailing on me, it's probably best practice to have one pre-placed when possible, as holding onto it to use while you're being attacked means you may be interrupted while casting, and it's probably downstate at that point. If you find you struggle with life force management, Eternal Life instead of Death Perception and Soul Reaping may warrant some consideration. In more than one instance, I miscalculate animations and cancel them a split second before they finish. If you find yourself doing this as often as I do, consider going into the mist and just comboing into training dummies. They may not fight back or interrupt, but it may be a good way to warm up your fingers. It's often tempting to try to time animations or the cast bar perfectly, but we all make miscalculations sometimes. You can treat this as warming up, or you can warm up with training dummies. I'm not a great player by any stretch, but my improvement is based on a process, and not immediate results. I can survive and sometimes win outnumbered fights, because I practice those situations whenever I can. So don't be afraid to test your limits, take seemingly unfavorable fights, and make unorthodox plays. Wins always feel better than losses, but a certain path to improvement is to learn from our failures. So don't beat yourself up too much when you misplay or lose a fight. There's always the next fight, the next duel, the next match. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video informative and entertaining. If you learned something or have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments or hit me on Discord. And if you think everything I said was completely wrong, I'd like to hear that too. Really. Finally, if you like this kind of long-form content from me, let me know, as I'll be able to produce it much faster in the future, if there's enough interest in it. I appreciate every one of you for giving my videos a chance. All the likes and comments on my editing and my montages really makes me want to keep going. I hope you have a great day and that all your 1vx fights are wins, or at least valuable lessons. See you in the mists, in the Borderlands, and in the next video. Thanks.